Hello and welcome to Ravlic at Large. My name's Tom Ravlic, and this is a special edition of the program. So thank you for joining me for this particular episode. I got a book in my hands right now that's been endorsed by a gentleman by the name of Rabbi Abraham Cooper, who is the director of Global Social Action at the Simon Wiesenthal Center. And he's endorsed a book by someone I've interviewed before. And Rabbi Cooper has described the contents of this book in this manner. Read Jeff's narrative, and if you're thinking of joining the ranks of Nazis or looking for an exit, reach out to him. The life you save may be your own. Rabbi Cooper and Jeff Schoep, the former leader of the National Socialist Movement, have known each other for some years. He's endorsed the book. The book's called American Nazi, From Hate to Humanity. Jeff joins me now to talk about the book and some of the issues within it. Jeff, thanks for joining me again, and congratulations on having the book published. It looks fairly substantial, and unlike some of my stuff, it's actually got colour pictures in there as well for people who are into that kind of thing. Well done. How do you feel having got it out of the system?
Well, thanks for having me back on the program, Tom. And the book was it was a work. It took a long time. It took me a long time to put it together, and a lot of stress, I guess you could say. When I first left the movement, I said, I didn't think that I had any trauma or anything like that. People would talk about trauma, I'd say, that's nothing. Revisiting those memories and recalling that and actually writing a lot of that stuff down, that was dealing with a lot of trauma. So I see it as very real now, but it took a lot of work. It took a lot of energy and a lot of revisiting, very difficult times for me. So I'm glad it's done, but I think it's not like anything else out there. I don't think there's anything like it out there, and I think it's ultimately it's a redemption story. It's a story of going from the darkness to the light.
Okay. Let's talk about catharsis. Writing can be cathartic. If I open your book, I see it start somewhere. But as a writer myself, I know that the first thing I will often write might be the middle of the book, and that middle of the book then gets built around. What was the thing that you felt most comfortable writing about first when you began forming your ideas, when you began building out the manuscript?
Basically, I went back and started at the beginning and talked about growing up and in our household and just our home and how things were like, and then went on into my fascination with the movement and why I got involved. And some of the earlier stuff was easier to write because you're farther removed from it. So some of the more recent stuff was more difficult to write, but ultimately I ended up after it was mostly written, I switched around the opening chapter a couple times. Like originally I had I wanted the book to start with a flash forward, which is probably not the way a lot of books work, but I felt that was important to start with a flash forward with a really violent scene, something that had taken place, and ended up using that for the starter. But I switched that around a couple of times. I wasn't sure which would be the best chapter to start with, but I knew it was going to be a flash forward.
You mentioned that it's a lot easier to write about things that were further removed in terms of time and space than the more recent stuff. Can you expand on that?
Well, I think with time and distance, it's easier to write about things because it happened longer ago. But the stuff that was more recent was difficult. All of it was difficult to write, but there was some chapters that were harder than others. Um, how to unpack that? Yeah, it's tough. But like revisiting some of the close calls and things like that, and originally, the book was double the length, and I ended up cutting it in half and having to shorten things up and removing some chapters. So then
Okay.
deciding like what would people find most interesting out of that, because there was a lot of things that I didn't share in the book either, but I shared a lot of stuff. And then memories come flooding back. Especially when you put yourself back in those situations from like 30 years back, and you have to remember it and think about it, and a lot of that stuff, I think psychologically a lot of people, myself included, you distance yourself from it. You In that world, I can tell you this, that there was a lot of things that I stuffed down. It would happen, like you'd almost get killed or something, and you just went stuff that down. You didn't process it, you didn't think about it, and a lot of that stuff I didn't really honestly, I didn't really process a lot of that stuff and a lot of that trauma, a lot of those terrible experiences until I got out, and had time to really think about it and dwell on those things. Because when you're involved in it and you're in a high stress environment, like leading the National Socialist Movement, the Nazi Party, you're going from battle to battle, and you don't have time to think about, oh, gee, I almost died last night. You just keep going.
Of the work that is sitting in the published document now, um, which chapter would you characterize as being the toughest to lay out in writing?
Hmm. There were so many chapters. I don't even have the book in front of me right now. But I would say some of the struggles that I went through getting out were really tough to write about, because that was so new. It was so fresh, I guess you could say. That was tough. And also revisiting some of the, like, there was an issue in where I had survived an attempt on my life, and I was in court, and I don't know how much I want to share about that. If I tell the whole book, then people won't want to read it. But there was an incident. There was an incident where I went to court, and the person the people that tried to kill me were. Uh, it was said in the courtroom that they were heroes for the standing up to the hatred that I represent, and that was probably one of the most difficult chapters to write about, bringing me back to that time.
I guess if we, the one that I found interesting in reading through the book again, having read an earlier manuscript, um, was some of the challenges you had in processing what the hell went on in Charlottesville. Um, that seemed to me, at least the way you've written it, to be an extraordinary episode because you came across some behaviours that you say in the book you'd never seen before.
Yep.
Um, having been in a life where you see a lot in a kind of an illicit network type environment, which any extreme group is, um, that's an extraordinary declaration. What are some of the things that you observed in and around the Charlottesville episode that led you to say that?
With Charlottesville, the what was really disturbing was there was one individual that was trying to set people on fire. That was something I'd never seen before. Um, I had attended rallies for 27 years. Um, and I'd seen a lot of violence over all those years, but typically a lot of the violence that I experienced was sometimes fighting with other groups, sometimes fighting with far left groups like Antifa, sometimes inner movement violence, within the organization or with rival groups or things like that. But typically at rallies and public events, at least rallies, I should say, you had a large police presence, and in Charlottesville, there wasn't. The police did not come out until it was declared like a state of emergency by I believe by the governor, and they just stood by. So that was something I'd never seen before. I didn't have any. I wasn't involved in setting up permits or anything like that for the rally, but anything that I had set up over the course of 25 years, 27 years total, but 25 years leading the NSM, there was always conversations with law enforcement before events, like, this is where you guys are going to be, this is where we're going to be. And there was all these details and stuff that had went on. As I said, I wasn't involved in that in Charlottesville, so I don't know what those conversations were like, but it was very bizarre coming out of the parking ramp where we had parked, and seeing no police out there, and then just like open battles with the communists and far left groups. It was really something I hadn't seen before like that.
It interested me when you explored that area in the book, because one thought, and you'd understand why it would enter my head. One thought that came up was that, you know, these guys really need a ball of people in the middle between them, because they mix like oil and water, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you assumed the police would be there. You assumed, for whatever reason, because of your own experience in other contexts, that they would be there. And the way you've written that episode in the book, something was missing for you. And correct me if I'm wrong, but that sense of predictability of knowing that even if you got a bit noisy, exercising, your First Amendment rights and whatever have you, there would be a wall of people that would keep, the counter protesters away. Was the uncertainty about that environment, given the way it played out, the thing that caused you to get particularly nervous?
At the time when I was going into it, I didn't have any sleep the night before. I was up, and I didn't really sleep the night before. I didn't really think about that stuff. I just remember coming out of the ramp and seeing, there's not police out here, and then all of a sudden, as soon as we had gotten walking down the street, then the clashes just started almost almost automatically. It just popped off, and at that point, you're not thinking about, I wonder where the cops are, or anything like that. You're just thinking, watch out for flying bottles, watch out for, people swinging weapons at you, and things of that nature. So it was, there was times during the fighting and the melees and stuff like that where, you saw people covered in blood, and the air was full of tear gas and mace and pepper spray and paint and everything, glitter and everything you could imagine, and we were being pelted with urine balloons, which was a pretty common Antifa tactic, and it was just brutal, and the fact that there was no law enforcement out there separating it, that's a staple at every rally that I'd been at for decades. That is the first time I'd seen that. Now, I've been at stuff where, sometimes the police lines falter. There was another incident in the book where we talked about, going around the police lines and clashing with people, things like that. But there was always police there. The only time there wouldn't be is if you did a rally that wasn't announced or something, like you just showed up in a community and did a walking picket and didn't tell law enforcement. The way I handled those things when I was running the NSM was there was always permits for things, and if you did a walking picket, that was a little different. But for announced rallies, everybody knew that Charlottesville was happening. That was advertised everywhere. It was all over the place. Everybody knew. So the fact that there was no law enforcement there, it's a question. I assumed somebody would answer at some point, and there would be. I hesitate to say too much about it, because it's a lot of it's speculation. We don't know who was exactly the one that was calling the shots on those things, but I would say that whoever had told law enforcement not to show up, or whoever made that call, I would assume that there should be some accountability for that.
You use an interesting phrase in that part of the book when things got particularly ugly and you thought that it was going to result in some serious damage. There was a phrase in the book somewhere where in that, as you head towards the end of the episode in Charlottesville, where you talk about wondering whether there was some sort of glorious death or something or other about to happen in the name of the cause. Is that what you were thinking at the time?
Yeah, I mean, the way that whole incident went down, and the people around, some of the people around me, and I wasn't out loud saying anything about a glorious death or anything like that, but that's what was going through my mind, is that this could be it. Some of the people that were around me had said a couple things about, like, hey, it was an honor serving with you and stuff like that. It was like, uh-oh, morale is way down. This is not good, is how I was thinking at the time. But it was just so strange that there was not that there wasn't anybody separating the sides. We started out, it seemed like there was some militia groups that were there that were trying to separate both sides, and they were just overrun almost immediately. So that didn't work out too well. But that was a hard chapter to write, because I didn't want to write it and like cast blame on anyone. That's why I'm being careful about how I speak about it now too. Like, I don't want to cast blame anywhere. It was a horrible incident, and a young woman lost her life, and other people were hurt. A lot of people were hurt. So that should have never happened. That should have absolutely never happened. And it's a great regret that I have to this day, that I was even there.
Now, coming back to that phrase in the book, as you lead up talking about the catastrophe that you're in the middle of, it'd be fair to use that too. How much of that stuff in people's heads, about the glory for this, that, or the other, is embedded in thinking about a movement, regardless of what the movement happens to be? Because though that sentiment came from somewhere, didn't it? It's not as if, at that point you'd made the switch to leave. Where does that whole glory and in fighting for a particular cause come from?
Well, extremist groups, that's a pretty common theme. You have it with your Islamic extremist groups, you have it with far-right extremist groups. A lot of extremist groups, of all stripes, have that mentality. And it's in battle, you feel like, if somebody dies in battle, that's a glorious death in a lot of ways. So this is a martyr now. So they get called different things in different circles, but really it's martyrdom. So if somebody loses their life fighting for a cause, that person is revered, and so on and so forth. So that's kind of where the mind goes. And I think, and it's psychologically, for the individual, you have to you have to psych yourself up, because if you're afraid, if you have fear in a situation like that, first of all, other people are going to sense it, and you're much more likely to make a mistake that could cost you your life or somebody else their life, or people. That's when people get hurt. So I always, under severe stress or in dangerous situations, I always remained really calm, because I just felt like if something was to happen, then it's meant to be. Then that's what's going to happen.
One of the things that struck me in reading the book, and I guess through the different elements when you talk about, rallies where um, a counter protest or the counter party, the people didn't like the NSM, got a bit rowdy, and your guys bought into it, and then through um, the other episodes, obviously throughout the Charlottesville thing, one of the things that strikes me, given my reading in the area, um, and how did the cops actually tell the difference between the groups?
How do they deal with it?
How do they tell the difference between the groups? Because
Oh,
all of
how
a
do they
sudden
tell
you're
the
gonna,
difference?
how do they tell the difference? So he is. I'm looking at it thinking, well, he's a group of extremists, and he's another group of extremists. Jeff's written very eloquently about them. Um, it is difficult for me to not come to the conclusion that the two cohorts are equally nuts.
Right. And the police don't pick sides in these things. They have to. They're typically in these situations, and like I said, the police didn't come out until the state of emergency was called. Now we're seeing National Guard vehicles driving around, and police are telling everybody get off the streets, and that's when we started making our way back, to the vehicles and stuff. But typically in those situations, where there was clashes at events and things like that, the police were more under assault by the far left. The far left would say the cops and the Nazis, or the Nazis and the Klan go hand in hand, or they had all these different chants, but they equated us and the cops as kind of the same, whereas the cops didn't like us. But as far as the far left, extreme left, far left groups, they lumped Nazis, cops, all the same. So they knew the police were usually under getting under barrages of like rocks and things like that were being thrown, and they would sometimes get hit and we would sometimes get hit. So like in like the Toledo riots, which I write about in the book, and also in Arizona where there was a riot in the streets, and other ones that I didn't mention in the book like LA. But a lot of times, the police knew we weren't throwing things at them, so they had to shield themselves from uh, rioters from the far left quite often. And I'm not saying that to pick sides or because I was far right or anything like that. They're all crazy, and crazy is not the right word, but they're all extreme, whether it's right or left. And I'm not. And some people say, well, the Nazis killed more people, or other people argue, no, the communists killed more people. I don't play that game. It's all bad. It's all bad. I'm just saying what I experienced, what I've seen, and a little bit what I wrote about, and I try to be as fair as possible. That's one of the things that took me so long to write the book, because I was researching a little bit, like on writing books, and there was somebody that had said, and I thought this is very helpful for me, but they were talking about, if you're writing a book, do not vilify anybody that you're talking about. Don't paint anyone bad. Readers don't like that. People don't want to be told who's good and who's bad. And if you get personal and call somebody names and things like that, that's not appropriate. Let people figure it out for themselves. So for the most part, I didn't do that, but in a couple places I noticed I did. And I said, you know what, I got to be more fair and more balanced about this. So I went back and fixed some of that stuff. And now, of course, I told about some stories about where I was calling somebody names or somebody was calling me names or something like that, that's different. But like trying to paint somebody in a certain way, I made sure I didn't do that as the best as I could. And that took a lot of time, because that a thought has to go into that, not say like this side was bad and my side was good. I don't do that. That's what gets you into these extremist groups in the first place, when you start labeling people and you start um, trying to put people in a box.
I think um, one of the things that is interesting is when you start talking about your conversations with Daryl Davis and Dia Khan. When did when did both of those conversations first start?
2016 and 2017 is the right in that time period. I believe I met Daryl in sometime in 2016, and I met Dia in 2017, or right around that time period.
So that then coincides with some of the stuff that went on with Charlottesville as well.
Dia was with me in Charlottesville.
She was with you in Charlottesville
Yeah. Yep.
with a camera crew in tow doing the documentary, or
Yep. Yep.
okay.
We got separated at one point, for a while, in there because of all the violence and everything. But yeah, she was with me there.
So over 2016 and 2017, you meet two people who influence you to start rethinking what you've dealt with since, or where you've been since the early 90s, essentially. Um, and then you go through Charlottesville. So between 2017 and early 2019, there's a lot of thinking going on, isn't there?
Oh, that's the understatement of the year. There was so much thinking going on. I beat myself up a lot over that, and I've said it. I've said, Daryl and I are very close. He's like family to me now, and we work together, and we were just at an event just last week together again. And a while ago, I had said to him, I said, "Man." I said, I can't believe I was so stupid that I stayed after, 2016, 2017. Like, I don't, I should have left sooner. I should have left sooner. And he goes, I know how your mind works, Jeff. You had to try to figure out every single way you could to fix things. You had to try all these different things, and that's accurate, like, and I try to see it that way now. But what I was trying to do is, during those last years, I'm calling the organization a white civil rights group. It's a Nazi party, and I'm calling it a white civil rights group. I'm demanding every time I talk to the press, stop calling it a Nazi group. It's a white civil rights organization. I look at it, and I look at that now, and I kind of laugh about it, because, like, man, how stupid was that? But and I talk about this when I speak at schools to young people and stuff like that. And I say, you know what? I was trying to put lipstick on a pig. You can put lipstick on a pig, but it's still a pig. It's not pretty. And I didn't really realize that until after I got out. Like, looking back at it now, it seems completely crazy. But at the time, I was trying to, I was saying, oh, let's not use the swastika in public anymore. Let's call it a white civil rights group. We're not racist. There was, these things were being said. We just care about our people. And you can justify this stuff. You can't justify it, but in your mind, psychologically, you do a lot of that kind of justification. And I know when I first left, when I first started speaking out, there was some individuals that I knew that I had recruited into the movement that had reached out at that point, and they were like, "Why are you saying that you were about hate? I didn't join your movement. I didn't get involved because of hate. You don't hate anybody. That's why I joined. This was about pro-white. This was about helping white people." So I thought like that too. I had that mindset too. But when you go back and you break it all down, it is hate. If you're dehumanizing other people, That's not just white pride anymore. That's not just standing up for your people. If you're dehumanizing others, that's hate. So that's hard for a lot of people to see. It was hard for me to accept, and that's why it took me a lot of time to kind of to really break free from that. And I thought I could fix it. I felt responsible for it. Like the old saying that says, this is your bed, now you have to lie in it. I felt like this is what I had done all my life. My business was wrapped up in it. Everybody I knew was wrapped up in it. Just about everybody. Just about everybody I knew. So I felt responsible, like I had to fix it. That I could fix it. And going through that process for several years and realizing there's no fixing this. You can put lipstick on it all day long, Jeff, but you're not going to fix it. It's still a pig. So then I finally made the, last straws, and this is it. I'm done. I'm out. I have to, the only way to fix this is by leaving it.
We've touched on Daryl Davis and the kind of previous conversations I've had with you, but yeah, if you were to summarize the impact they had on your thinking around 2016, 2017, how would you do so?
To summarize it, it was life altering. It was life altering. The approach that they had, they didn't tell me that I was wrong. They didn't say what I was doing was evil or hateful or anything like that, even though it was hateful. They showed me how it was wrong. They showed me how it made them feel. And that was an approach that nobody had ever taken with me before, by saying like, look, I know you believe in this. I know you stand for this, but this is how it made me feel. And both of them shared with me like how racism and hatred affected them growing up as kids, how it hurt them. And all of a sudden, I think I'm fighting for this noble cause, and seeing that, sensing that pain or feeling that pain, that empathy, for another human being that's sitting across from you, sharing something deeply personal like that, that's life altering in itself. So that I feel like Daryl Davis planted that first seed for me. Like, there was other things too, but that really got the wheels in my head turning, like, hey, this is not this noble cause that you thought it was, and you try to justify these things, and you can say, like when terrible things happen, like when there was a mass shooting in the name of the movement or anything like that, um you could try to distance yourself from it and say like, well, that was a crazy person, that was somebody that just went off the rails. When that's happening over and over and over and over and over again, you have to start looking inward and going, you know what, it's not that all these people are crazy. It's the ideology that's driving people to do that. So it took a while for that to really set in for me.
So, Daryl Davis, Deer Khan, Charlottesville, then what happened?
Hmm.
Because you go from meeting Daryl Davis, him talking to you about black musicians who you probably never listened to before until Daryl sort of said hi. Deer Khan comes along and gives you something to think about. Charlottesville happens, and you get another layer of stuff to think about. What happens from that point?
There was, it was business as usual in a lot of ways, but internally, I mean, externally, it was business as usual, like, after Charlottesville, we put out after action report like we did after every single rally we attended. And, you make it sound like it was, um, it was usually about the fighting and stuff like that. Our brave warriors stood strong in the streets, whatever. You put out these statements, and there was more rallies after that, and more events. And but internally, I wanted to break free from it. Like I just did not want to be involved in it anymore. I thought it was harmful for humanity and everything else, and I'm trying to fix it in my mind. That's the way I'm justifying staying. I'm trying to fix it, and took a while before I realized that I couldn't fix it. So early 2019, I finally broke away from it and said, that's it, I'm retiring. And I knew I was not just retiring, but that was a tactical move. So, because I knew I wanted to speak out against racism and hate, and I knew I wanted to do something with peace building. I didn't know what that looked like or what, I didn't know anything about civilian life. I just knew I wanted to do something to fix the damage that I had done by the past life that I'd led, and that I wanted to help people and do something good and noble. Not just think I was doing something good and noble, but really do that. So I knew I needed to break free from that movement. And so I said, I'm going to retire. And the reason why I retired before openly denouncing it is because I knew there'd be threats and all kinds of craziness that would go on after I made that statement. So I needed some time to process things and internalize that. And that probably was the most difficult time of my life, is that period from when I retired until before I started speaking out.
No, in this part of the world, that is in Australia and New Zealand, 2019 is famous for something else. Or infamous for something else, I should say. Because early in that year, you had the Christchurch massacre that was committed by an individual. Did that have any influence in you leaving, or had you already decided to pack the tent up and move on from the LSM when Christchurch happened, before Christchurch happened?
There was a bunch of mass shootings and stuff right around that time when I first was thinking about leaving till I left, and then soon after as well. But I was planning on leaving, I would say late 2018. But I didn't get around to it until I think it was March 3rd or early March, February, March of 2019 that I actually broke away. So yeah, some of those things, seeing those things, like the mass shootings and things like that too, it was more, you could say, that were nails, that's not the proper term that I'm looking for, but more reasons to leave.
So
All of those.
you saw all those incidents that followed your decision to leave as being a vindication or justification for the decision that you had made and were in the process of acting on.
Yeah.
Right. When does the Simon Wiesenthal Centre come in from stage left?
That was it. That's an interesting story too. So, when I made my announcement, which was sometime in August of 2019, that I was denouncing racism and I wanted to do something with peace building, or that I just basically denounced the movement, denounced racism, and I put out my personal website. Within like 2 days of that website going up, I get an email from the director of research at the Simon Wiesenthal Center, Rick Eaton, and he says, hey, I saw your website, and would you be interested in meeting up? And yeah, I kind of laugh about it now, or we laugh about it now, but the first thing that went through my mind is, in the movement, we knew who the Wiesenthal Center was. I knew who the Wiesenthal Center was because they were the people that hunted the old Nazi war criminals. They were known for finding the Nazi war criminals. I didn't know anything about anything else they did, the work with education and all the wonderful stuff that I'm involved in now. But I just knew about that aspect of the Wiesenthal Center. So I thought, I was really curious to meet Rick and what he would have to say, but also a little nervous because I had said to my girl at the time, I said, I'm going to go meet this guy. But I said, if I don't come home, I said, it means I'm on an involuntary extradition to Israel. I thought, I didn't really think that, but there was a little voice in the back of my head was like, what if the Mossad comes and tries to grab me and send me off to Israel? So, I do a lot of work with the Jewish community now, and that one always gets laughs. But it was like, I really didn't think that, but there was just that I always prepare for worst case scenarios, and that was worst case scenario. I'd go meet with this individual and be kidnapped by the Mossad and sent to Israel to stand trial or something. No, I didn't kill anybody or anything like that. So it was being involved in this movement is super ultra paranoid. It's an ultra paranoid environment. So you think about things like that. You know, those are the things that go through the mentality of a lot of the people involved in it.
You've been particularly generous with your time, and I'm not going to open up other parts of the book because there are those who haven't spoken to you who will find the book very, very illuminating. When I first spoke to you back in 2021, I think it was, a little while ago, I'd go online and do the Google search and look at all the photographs and things like that. And you've got a collection of them in there. When you look at the photographs from the time you were in the movement, and some of them are in the book, do you recognize the person in there?
I know it's me, obviously, but it is like looking back at it's almost like looking back at somebody else. You know, you have to remove yourself uh from that, who you once were. So for me, like when I'm doing talks today with Simon Wiesenthal Center at schools, with community events or anything like that, a lot of times, not so much at the schools, but a lot of times for the community events, we play a video of my time in the movement, and it shows all these clips of who I was, and it, that's even harder than the pictures, but it's the same concept. It's the same. It's answering the question you asked. It's like looking at someone else. It's like, that's a stranger. I don't know that person anymore. Obviously, I know it's me, but looking back on it, that's a completely different person back at that time, and I've done a lot of work to get where I'm at today, and make those changes. But if you stay locked into that um, guilt and those negative feelings about the past, you stay stuck there. I've seen that happen to people. I've seen it eat people alive, so I try not to stay stuck in that. I try to remove myself from that. Obviously, I can look at it and I say, I know that was me. It's not something that I was proud of, but if I can make a difference now through the book, through the talks, through the work that I'm doing now and continue to do, and all the people I've helped pull out of these extremist organizations, that's fulfilling, that's meaningful, and that's making a difference. So I feel like redemption is real, and that it can be achieved. It's not for me to say, like if people say, um, should other people forgive you? That's a question I can't answer, but and I struggled even with the like forgiving myself. Like I had been asked that question a lot at talks and things, and an African American friend of mine, a guy named Ron, he had heard me say that at a talk. He had said, "I don't know if I can ever forgive myself." And he came up to me afterwards, started shaking me. He says, "Don't you ever say that again? Like if you think like that and you don't realize the good that you're doing in the world now, and you don't focus on that, you're going to be stuck." You're going to be stuck mentally. And he was right, that I've seen it. I've seen it with other people that I know, people that I've worked with, and even some folks that have been out of the movement much longer than I have, and they just stay stuck in it, and it causes them it's crippling. It's mentally crippling, and they're not able to help themselves, and they're not able to help anybody else either. So that's unhealthy, and I try not to live in that space. I try to look at the positive things that are happening in the world, and what I can positively affect. And I've helped a lot of people, and working in peace building now, and collaborating with the Wiesenthal Center, and reaching young people. After just about every single talk, there's at least one person that will write to me later or wait and hang out afterwards to talk and share things and be like, "Hey, I have a family member that's in a cult," or I have a family member that's in a extremist organization. Your talk really reached me. It really helped me. It gave me the tools that I feel like I can go home and I can utilize these, and that 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 says it all. I think, that makes a difference. Like, if you can make a difference in just one person's life, then it's worth it, and it's so many more than that. So I feel like the book has that possibility. It has that potential to reach people, to help people, and they can see, like, look, if somebody like Jeff Schoep, that was leading the Nazi party for 25 years, if he can change, I can do it too. What excuse do I have? So that's what we try to do, is like, if this process of relational dialogue and the way I was reached, it works in the extremes, so we can reach other people all over the world with it, and that's what I'm doing. I'm trying to replicate that. I have been replicating it, and continue to reach other people. So it's a story of hope and redemption, and it doesn't mean it's not just for people that have been through the movement or that sort of thing. It's like, if you've been in any sort of darkness, you can crawl out of that, whether that's addiction, whether that's an extreme religious movement, a cult, far right, far left, you name it, or you have a family member or know somebody that's struggling with different things like that. It all kind of goes back to the same thing, or a gang as well. All these things intersect, and they all have the same psychology and mindset. The politics, the ideologies are all over the place, but the mindset is the same.
One of the things that you learn when you study terrorism and extremism the way I did, and you look at every conceivable movement, it comes down to one thing. You draw a matrix, and you draw the ideology, activity, recruitment, execution of the plans to protest or rally or whatever have you. It's not much different from one to the other. And that's something that that last message is something people probably should have a bit of a think about. I know you're coming out to Australia fairly shortly, so it'll be interesting to see you down here. And I can assure you there are no kangaroos hopping the streets of Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane. But good luck with the book.
Thank you.
Hope it goes well, and I will certainly be keen to see how it progresses, both through America and through Europe, and obviously the market here in Australia and then across New Zealand. So thanks for joining me again, Jeff.
Thanks, Tom. It's been an honor.
Cheers. I've been talking to Jeff Schoep, who, as I've said, is going to visit Australia in late August, early September. He will be doing some public speaking and doing some media, so keep an eye out for opportunities to hear the author of American Nazi. It is worthwhile having a look at the book and understanding what that world is like and why anyone you love wouldn't want to be anywhere near it. Thanks for joining this special episode of Ravlic at Large. I look forward to bringing another episode reasonably soon. Thank you.